Our vertical for trend number 4 is technology, and we're calling this trend the victory of defaults. It's all about the buyer's journey. For this topic, our guest is Lucie Greene of Light Years. She's a forecaster, strategist, and author specializing in cultural trends, consumer insight, and brand innovation based here in Los Angeles. Lucie, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I just saw you at CES. It's great to see you in such a short period of time again.
I know, I get to see you all the time now.
I love it. And I guess I should say you're moving back to New York. Awesome. So it's like interesting in the sense that it leads into my first question, which is you're in this building in New York and they ask you questions like, do you have a dog walker? Do you have this delivery service? Do you have these other things? Are buildings now entering this trend of being this victory of defaults where they're asking what your habits or behaviors are so they can make sure those services are delivered to you?
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm moving into essentially a sort of millennial creche, right? A daycare center. But on a sort of more analytical front, it's kind of the building as service, right? And
Wow.
as an ecosystem of touch points, and they've built the relationships, they're getting to know you, they're getting that data pool, and they're making it so, the reward is that they make it super convenient. So they will hook up your internet for you. They know when your birthday is. So the tentacles and the way in which they're getting to know inhabitants is becoming like an ongoing concierge.
So Aya, in the report, and again, for those watching, you can download it at blog.microsoftadvertising.com. What were you trying to get at this one so that maybe our audience understands what the victory of defaults means?
Absolutely. So it's all about the buyer's journey, as you mentioned earlier, and the brands that will essentially embrace the customer experience and put customer first and get to know them on a personal level and develop those long-term relationships will become the default for them. From the technological perspective, the space is so saturated. I mean, look at the search engine results page. There's so many ads, right? And there's so many ads that we're being served on a daily basis just across all different platforms. So it is so difficult as a consumer to pick one brand. You just get bombarded by all this information and content. So in that regard, how do you pick something that you trust and something that you have maybe tried or willing to try? Or is technology going to be there to help you pick it? So are the algorithms going to develop in a way that are defaulting to that brand that is most likely to benefit you?
Yeah.
Right.
How do you answer that one?
Well, I mean, we're seeing it in, Amazon for me is one of the ultimate default brands, right? I would probably buy a house through Amazon based on the level of trust that I have with it. And like, if it is moving into bank accounts, I'd probably bank with it. I really trust with it. And it's created this, not only a virtuous ecosystem of services, but a virtuous ecosystem of ease. Like the fact that everything is so intuitively interlinked. It's sort of interconnected for me with my Amex. So Amex is another one that has created this ecosystem of like-minded brands that make it super easy to sort of flip between the two and get benefits. It creates this default loyalty as well as ease. So yeah, seeing more and more of that.
Hey, question for you on this, because I think a lot of times when we look at like a technology trend, people are like, okay, what's the tech that powers it? But my question here is really more on the creativity around it. Like, how are people tapping more into defaults? Is it around creative imagery? Is it around lifestyle? Before we were on camera here, we were talking a little bit about some of those brands out there that are using more inclusivity to drive defaults. I mean, talk a little bit more about that, how that plays into it, that this isn't just a pure data tech play.
No, I think it's also more personalization and trying to create sort of more emotional bonds with the user and therefore create more loyalty. So it's that combination of ease and emotion, I think, and sort of knowing who you are and anticipating what you might want in a non-creepy way, like as in with like interesting content or recommendations that really are intuitively suited to you.
Yeah.
Do you think Tom Cruise is creepy?
Yeah, that's a question. Yeah, I guess because, what was that quote about big tech and Tom Cruise?
Oh, I've been talking a lot about like big tech's reputation, just generally, I feel like you talked about this with your zebra trend versus unicorns, but just this idea that like big tech, when you think about it, used to have this really sort of ironclad control over its narrative of being, you know, transformative, positive, saving the world, changing the world for the better, building the future. And I joke that like it no longer has that control over its narrative. The sort of the veil has been lifted, and it's like Tom Cruise; it can't control its image anymore. So and it's open season now. We can criticize it, and I've been looking at this particularly from a talent point of view recently. When you think about even sort of 5 years ago, if you graduated from university, the only place you would want to work in as synonymous with the future would be like a Facebook, a Google, an Instagram. And in quite a short time, that has really shifted. And it's partly to do with ethics. We saw research in the UK recently talking about tech workers who have even left jobs because they don't feel that they're able to scenario plan the ethical consequences of what they create in the tech space. But I also think it's sort of representative of a shift in millennial attitudes to work. Like after a decade of killing themselves, millennials are sort of burnt out and don't want to work on weekends, even if there is a gym and free pizza, right? They want to work with somewhere where they can make an impact. And the reality is these organizations are so huge and in fact quite corporate for all the sort of ukuleles that they've played alongside their promotional videos for a long time. So I think that the brand narrative from a talent point of view, from a product standpoint, has really shifted with that group.
So, I mean, like this trend of victory of defaults, even the hiring mechanisms changes in terms of this isn't just a consumer play. This is also like a recruiting play, how companies have to position themselves for future recruits. Would you say that I'm correct in assuming that?
Yeah, I think the lines between consumer brand and talent brand are completely intertwined now. And so the way you position yourself to consumers, it really impacts like how desirable you are to work for. So like TikTok is obviously hugely cool. It's not affecting elections in a negative way, or so we hope. And but it's also associated with innovation, and so people are using it because they find it incredibly fun and engaging. But it also, therefore, I think, has a default rainbow effect in making it a really cool place for that teenagers or young people might want to work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Question in terms of, we saw each other at CES recently, and we're talking about, some people don't want to work themselves to death. That ties into a lot of tech we saw that was there in terms of, how people basically are, I guess, instead of FOMO, it's like JOMO, joy of missing out. I mean, talk a little bit more about how some of this tech, which could be a default in the next 10 years, is starting to evolve.
Well, you're seeing, of course, this like explosion of well-being tech, and I would connect that just generally to this era of anxiety and unease about the world around us, right? In recent years at CES, which I see as the bellwether to what, or a window into consumers' view of the world and what is making them anxious, what they're worried about, and what they want. And so we've not only seen the proliferation of well-being gadgets that help people measure and self-optimize and that feed into basically lifestyle as a form of preventative healthcare, right, from chronic disease. But you've also seen a whole number of offshoots of that, like blurring into sort of environmental concerns, security concerns. So water purifiers that you can have on a key ring, air purifiers, pollution monitors, masks that are connected for when you're cycling to tell you when you're encountering too much pollution, home devices that are using sensors. You can measure now that like how prone your house might be to a natural or ecological disaster. There's a whole load of gadgets that are really sort of, I see it sort of driven by consumers wanting to fortify themselves against the world around them and potential economic, health, or political unease or social unrest. Everything is sort of protective, which is really interesting.
It sounds like we're becoming preppers, even if we don't want to be preppers. Is that what you're getting at?
Yep. Yeah, I would say so.
Right. Hey, I have a final question for you in terms of inclusive marketing. it's now, I assume, the default. It is the industry standard. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, I think it really is. And that's really being driven by a very outspoken teenagers and young millennials who are really becoming very cognizant of the visual images that they're presented with, very outspoken on social media, very sophisticated in how they address lazy stereotyping or imagery, and really demanding that brands are representative. So whether that's body type, whether that's ethnicity, whether that's showing acne, like so CVS has already taken action and stopped airbrushing acne out of images, multiple aged representation. And that's going a stage further as well to really recognizing the importance of having diverse teams creating marketing and advertising, and how that actually can make it even better, and at the very worst, or at the very least, avoid calamitous errors that result in sort of call-out cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And to me, I think the whole conversation here about technology wraps up to technology is very powerful and it's a conduit, but essentially the driving force behind it will determine whether it's positive or negative. So in that sense, it can drive diversity and inclusion. It can drive all of these benefits to the consumers. On the other hand, if it's poorly executed and used in the wrong way, perhaps it can actually negate that impact.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a rising recognition and understanding of inherent biases in artificial intelligence and visual recognition. Really the fact that we've inherited this whole internet space that has been sort of architected by a very singular demographic or type of person, normally a white man, sorry. But
Well, they're definitely men.
and how when systems go engage with people on a mass level, like how calamitous that can be. So you're already seeing Whitney Wolf, the CEO of Bumble, for example, has been talking about this idea of the female internet. Like, what if we redesigned the internet with a female lens from the ground up, right? You're seeing a lot more organizations looking at bias in AI and on social media platforms in more detail. So Amnesty International actually did a piece of research looking at Twitter recently and the level of misogyny experienced by women on Twitter. And they coined the phrase digital violence, which I think is really interesting as an idea. But the other area which I think is actually being really, or technology and AI and data analytics is becoming really used positively, is in the streaming space. So when you think about it, when cable TV, like the viewing figures used to be fairly, compared to now, fairly nebulous, but
Yeah.
the amount of data being that these companies have access to about who is watching stuff, what is a hit, what pools of consumers that they haven't recognized, and that could present real opportunities, that the data has played a really positive role in terms of driving this diversity wave in Hollywood, which is late. But even you have like actresses like Reese Witherspoon saying it's transformed her earning potential because now you have like very nuanced, credible data. Google has been doing some interesting work with the Gina Davis Foundation using visual analytics and verbal analytics as well to measure how often female protagonists are speaking, how loud they are, how often they're featured in entertainment. So we're almost seeing entertainment ahead of marketing in this space.
This is that's fascinating,
Yeah.
especially because for years it was like you had the numbers, but you just didn't know who was behind them. So the streaming data is really important because it's like, hey, we can see that X amount of people streamed this. Those people were in these geolocations and were 70% female. I mean, it's all the things that we've basically been talking about from a content standpoint that, now you can develop things that actually are, you're using real data in that respect that it just didn't exist for a very long period of time.
Right, and to their credit, studios are actually really making decisive action on this. So you're seeing in 2020 like real diversity in mass market entertainment vehicles. Marvel embracing LGBTQ heroes, more progressive images and portrayals of
Awards
female
too.
heroes, right? And
Yeah.
well, awards need to go a little bit of a way, but
Yeah, but wasn't that the first time that non-American, or I guess like non-white female won, was a Golden Globes?
sure. But
Wait,
then
for
you
which
have
one, which category? Wait, for what
For the
again?
movies. I'm just talking
Who-
about
who-
the Hollywood.
Remind me who won again?
It was for the movie, it was a comedy series, totally blanking
Fleabag?
out. No,
No,
not
it
the
wasn't
Fleabag.
Fleabag.
It was this
No.
Asian girl. She won, and then
Aquafina.
Oh, yeah.
Aquafina.
Oh yeah, okay,
Yes.
okay,
And
yes.
then also was it an Asian movie that won?
Oh, Parasite.
Parasite
Yeah, that
was
movie's like the
also-
movie of the year.
yeah.
Yeah, for
Sure. I mean,
2019.
I feel like entertainment is moving faster than the awards system.
Yeah.
There's still massive gaps in representation, and I think it genuinely is starting to affect the relevance of things like the Oscars, that they're not recognizing talent that has clearly been really successful and done brilliant things.
And also, I wanted to mention, as we're speaking about inclusion, that Microsoft has made a commitment to inclusion as well, with Satya Nadella obviously leading the charge. And last year, inclusion became a part of how we get rewarded. So everybody, 140,000 employees around the world are taking actions and steps towards inclusion. So yeah, I'm really excited about the big tech really moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's impressive that, I mean, because that's what it needs. It needs sort of systemic, proactive action, really.
Systemic change. Lucie Greene from Light Years, always great to have
Thank
you.
you for having me.
Good to see you
Thank you.
twice in a row.
Right. I'll see you at Vegas next year.
Awesome. Lucie Greene here on the 2020 Vision Report.